One of Venezuela's opposition leaders, Claudio Fermín, has said that only citizens can act on the country's internal matters. He referenced a recent interventionist statement made by the so-called Lima Group of countries, which sought to undermine the country's electoral process.
I highly value what happened here in Venezuela on May the 20th, 2018. Those millions of citizens who took to the polls are very important. The fact is, this government is being criticised for many reasons, and although I agree with many of them, there are many more which I do not agree. So independently from all criticism, what validates any country's sovereignty are their citizens, not foreign ministers or presidents. Let's not consider Maduro for a moment. Let's think of the future. This is a small club of heads of state who have decided to undermine a government for not agreeing with them.
And Russia's foreign minister has said that the approach of the United States towards Venezuela highlights the country's attempts at undermining governments around the world. Lavrov added that the U.S. influence effectively killed any chance for dialogue between the Venezuelan government and the opposition.
We have heard talk that pushes for military intervention in Venezuela, that the United States will now recognize as the president of Venezuela the new head of the country's National Assembly, not Nicolas Maduro. All this is very alarming and shows the U.S. approach of undermining governments they don't like. That is a priority for them, in Latin America and in other regions. We know that the dialogue, which many Latin American nations were counting on, was eventually cut short because of the so-called irreconcilable opposition. There was influence from abroad, primarily from the United States. This influence in fact made talks with the opposition shut down completely, something that is very regretful.
Social movements in Colombia have expressed their support for the Venezuelan people and their government. They reject the hostility promoted by Iván Duque's government against their neighboring country.
¡Viva la revolución bolivariana de Venezuela!
Colombians are mobilizing to express their support for Venezuela and to criticize the interventionist policies promoted by the Colombian government.
It makes no sense. The position taken by our government has no moral or ethical standing. Our criminal government, all the governments we've had have basically been following the U.S. I can tell you that the Venezuelan government is very brave.
Social movements criticize the attacks against Venezuelan sovereignty. They highlight the fact that in Colombia, top officials are involved in corruption scandals, that there is a humanitarian crisis with poverty and malnutrition, and over 500 social leaders have been killed.
They don't have moral authority. Here in Colombia, we have serious issues. The public prosecutor is under investigation and is linked to the Odebrecht case. And many social leaders have been murdered.
Social movements also reject some belligerent messages promoted by the media and the manipulation of public opinion.
We should try to dismantle the media campaign against Venezuela, promoted by current and former government. This is a media war that's confusing the Colombian people.
And because of that, social groups have called for solidarity with the people who keep on struggling for independence, and importantly, against the attempts at intervention that go against democracy, freedom, and peace in the region.
The Argentinian President Mauricio Macri has met with his Brazilian counterpart, Jair Bolsonaro, in Brasilia. Bolsonaro greeted Macri at the Planalto Presidential Palace. The two leaders discussed the future of the Mercosur regional bloc, as well as border security and other defense issues. They also refused to recognize the elected government of Venezuela. Macri is the first foreign leader to visit the new Brazilian president. In other news, hundreds of Hondurans headed for the United States as part of the latest migrant caravan were stopped by officials at the Guatemalan border. Riot police prevented migrants from entering the country and demanded they provide personal documents to continue their journey, as migrants set up several tents nearby. A new migrant caravan started their way to the United States on Tuesday. About 200 migrants were able to pass through the Agua Caliente border crossing on Tuesday. However, hundreds were turned away or detained by Guatemalan migration officials for not having the necessary documents to enter the country.
The stories of Hondurans fleeing their country are all very similar. They say they do not have any options here, so they leave to protect their lives.
On April 9th of 2016, I was shot. The bullet went right through me. I sought justice, but authorities never solved my case.
Young people make up the majority of this second caravan. Their hopelessness and fear for the future has forced them to look for new opportunities.
There have been so many deaths. It's difficult not to be affected by them, so I want to be far away.
Many migrants have been victims of violence. Now they have to leave their families.
My mother is sick, and now she's going to be alone. She got shot the same day when I was attacked.
Daily violence has created panic and fear among the population, especially in those who live in the most dangerous areas.
There was a massacre where I was working. They told me they were going to kill me too. That is why I'm fleeing. There's a lot of violence and crime, and we're starving too.
A large percentage of people in the first and second migrant caravans are young people. So the future of Hondurans is fleeing from the country in order to save their own lives.
News anchor Marzieh Hashemi from the Iranian station Press TV is being held in a detention center in Washington, D.C. in FBI custody following an arrest at a St. Louis airport. No formal charges have been leveled against Hashemi, who is a U.S. citizen. Reports have indicated that Hashemi had her hijab removed against her will and that she was denied access to halal food. Relatives were unable to contact Hashemi for over 48 hours. And speaking to Press TV, Payman Jebeli, who heads the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting World Service, said that Hashemi was being held in inhumane, unethical and illegal psychological conditions.
Well, we today, in the morning, we learned that our dear colleague, Ms. Hashemi, like from 3 days ago, she's been detained. We didn't have any details about the incident until the time we learned that she's going through a tough time. We got aware that she has been kept in prison under very difficult conditions without any charges. It's not clear what her crime and accusation is.
And Press TV's CEO gave a news conference about the case earlier on Wednesday.
We hereby call on the U.S. government officials to talk about her accusation, about her detention place, and the reason for her detention anytime soon, because it seems that being transparent toward the world opinion is the best help that we can have for her release. We do not spare any efforts to do any legal action for her release. And this commitment, this is our ethical commitment, legal commitment, and administrative commitment regarding Ms. Hashemi. But with regard to our knowledge about the U.S. government, especially under the anti-terrorism law that is there in that country, without any pretext, without any indictment, they can actually arrest people and then detain people for years and then could release them without any accusations, or they may continue the arrest.
We move on to Mexico, where the new government has delivered on one of its first promises, to carry out an investigation into the case of the 43 missing students from Ayotzinapa. Our correspondent, Pablo Perez, has the details.
The parents of the 43 students who were forcibly disappeared in 2014 in the town of Iguala are now part of a government commission they long demanded. Now, they are no longer witnesses, but an integral part of the Presidential Truth and Justice Commission for the Ayotzinapa case.
We must help to find the truth in order to satisfy the demands of the families of the 43 missing students.
The Truth Commission is made up not only of public officials, but also includes some of the students' parents, as well as human rights activists and outside experts. They want to uncover the truth they believe was hidden by the government of former President Enrique Peña Nieto.
As parents, this commission means everything to us. As the investigations continue, we will be able to build more trust.
In this way, what President López Obrador established in a decree 2 days after taking office is being put into practice, and it's just the first of many decrees signed by the President.
This is the result of our efforts, of the insistence of the families, of our resistance. The truth will come out, and something like this will never be allowed to happen again.
Omar survived the violence of that fateful night in Iguala, when 43 of his friends disappeared and another 3 were murdered. For him, this new initiative will not only benefit these families.
It's not just the 43 missing students. We need the government to assume responsibility for bringing to light the truth about every case of disappearance.
At the same time, the Supreme Court has ordered an investigation into public officials working for the previous administration due to irregularities in the investigation of the Ayotzinapa case. As part of its commitment to the principle of transparency, the newly formed Truth Commission has promised that all information discovered will be made available on a government website.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back. Welcome back. The Tobago Business Chamber is hoping there can be some way of salvaging a deal that would allow Sandals Resorts to set up a multi-million-dollar resort on the island. The Chamber is convinced that the project would have been a turning point in Tobago's economy. The business group laments the possible loss of foreign investment regarding associated projects such as an airport expansion and a marina. On Tuesday, Sandals announced its withdrawal from the Tobago project after questions were raised about its possible environmental impact.
Is really the constant and ongoing negative publicity and media coverage that we have received over the last 2 years, 2.5 years since the inception of the project, that for us as a global brand and for what we stand for in the Caribbean, not only in the Caribbean but internationally, it is taking on a dynamic that we are not willing to carry on any longer.
Guyana's acting Chief Justice will give a ruling by the end of January regarding last month's no-confidence motion that led to the government's downfall. Acting CJ Roxanne George Wiltshire says she knows that the nation is waiting, so she will deal with the matters urgently. The validity of the no-confidence motion is being challenged in the High Court on the grounds that the vote of MP Charandas Professor was invalid because he holds a Canadian passport. The government petitioned the High Court to block the enforcement of the motion and to establish what constitutes a parliamentary majority.
Correct yourself. Correct it. No.
Cuba and Belize have committed to strengthening bilateral relations. President Miguel Díaz-Canel met with Belize Prime Minister Dean Borrow, who is in an official visit to Cuba. For over 2 decades, Belize and Cuba have enjoyed mutual cooperation in health and education. South Africa's Electoral Commission says it's all systems go for the May 2019 general elections. It launched a campaign to encourage young people to vote. And while the youth is the biggest population group in South Africa, many feel marginalized and let down by the country's politics.
This is Winterveld, one of the oldest townships on the outskirts of the capital, Pretoria. This settlement is a reflection of the high unemployment rate, especially among the youth. Job creation is on the campaign ticket for political parties hoping to unseat the ruling African National Congress. But they can only do so if they persuade young people like Tebogo Sibanyoni to vote. Tebogo has no high school leaving qualifications and grew up without parents, but was fortunate enough to receive this government-subsidized home. He survives by working as a sangoma. He's an urban shaman who accepts trainees who have a spiritual calling as he did when he was a teenager. But the money he makes here is not enough because of the high cost of living. So will he vote to realize the change he wants?
I'd like to get a job, and I'd like to see development in my community and the country as a whole. So I will vote ANC, because I'm not inspired by other parties. All they do is fight.
Political parties contesting the elections in the next few months often talk about their plans to help jobless university graduates. These young men who live a short distance away from Tebogo's home say they feel marginalized.
I'm hoping for job creation whether we are educated or not, and those who want to further their studies must be given bursaries to do so.
We look for jobs, but there is no breakthrough.
Others are still optimistic in the face of the high unemployment rate. Tsietsima Semola says the governing party has disappointed him, but he's still inspired to vote.
They have disappointed me, but that's how it goes. At least our grandparents get the social grants, and they help us at home when I don't make enough money.
Many social ills, including the effects of the marginalization of black people before 1994, still breed a highly unequal society. Perhaps it's time for politicians to rethink their approach towards the youth if they want to see them at the polls. Matiwa Mahlachi, Telesur, Winterveld, South Africa.
The unrest due to fuel price protests has left travelers from Zimbabwe stranded. Bus passengers traveling to Zimbabwe from South Africa found themselves stranded in Johannesburg as cross-border buses cancelled their routes. This has also blocked the flow of goods into Zimbabwe from the diaspora living in neighboring countries.
We were supposed to go to Harare, Zimbabwe now. We are coming from Port Elizabeth, but we can't proceed because they are saying things are tough. The buses are being banned and the roads are blocked. It's total shutdown. So as for today, we have to sleep here in Joburg.
Following days of protest over these fuel price hikes, Zimbabwe's security forces have begun arresting activists they accuse of inciting violence. The government has also reportedly cut off internet services.
The police arrived early at the home of Evan Mawarire and took the pastor and activist into detention. They say he was one of those responsible for encouraging the protests that began on Monday against the government's decision to increase fuel prices by over 150%.
They are alleging that he has incited violence through Twitter and other forms of social media, particularly in the Central Business District. We've asked for full particulars, when, how. They say they don't know. They'll give that to him at the police station. We've asked how asking for people to stay away can constitute incitement to violence. But of course, this is a new dispensation, guys.
Schools and shops are still closed in Harare, and the streets are empty. Residents say that although they want to go to work, there is no transport.
The way it looks like the people, they want to go to work, but unfortunately it seems as if transport operators are not willing to take them.
And the internet has been down since Tuesday. The CEO of the main phone operator posted a statement saying the government had ordered his company, Econet, to cut off the service. Zimbabweans living in South Africa held a demonstration at the Zimbabwean embassy in Pretoria on Tuesday. They expressed solidarity with fellow countrymen back home and protested over the heavy-handedness of state security agencies. Meanwhile, head of the European Union delegation in Zimbabwe has condemned the violent nature of the protests, but he also cautioned the security forces to use minimum force when dealing with the protests.
Kenyan security forces have killed 4 militants who were responsible for a hotel attack in Nairobi. President Uhuru Kenyatta made the announcement early Wednesday. At least 15 civilians were killed in this attack.
I can now confirm that as of about 1 hour ago, the security operation at Dusit Complex is over and all the terrorists eliminated. As of this moment, we have confirmation that 14 innocent lives were lost through the hands of these murderous terrorists, with others injured. We are grieving as a country this morning, and my heart and that of every Kenyan goes out to the innocent men and women violated by senseless violence.
The government of Ghana has appealed to its citizens in the diaspora to return home. In an effort to boost Ghana's economy, the government is aiming to reverse outward migration in 2019 and encourage the country's citizens working overseas to come home. This is in spite of the economic problems that the Western African country is facing.
It's a good idea for everybody to come back home if you're from Ghana or your roots are in Ghana, but I don't know if it's right to stay in Ghana at the moment. I don't feel personally that Ghana is that stable financially.
We're taking one last break, but stay with us. Welcome back. The Parliament in Britain has begun debating a motion of no confidence in the government of Theresa May. The opposition Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn tabled the motion after the government suffered the biggest defeat in British political history on Tuesday. Members of Parliament rejected May's Brexit deal with the European Union by a margin of 230 votes. The result of the confidence vote is expected at around 7 p.m. London time. Earlier, we spoke with Telesun political analyst Tariq Ali for some insight into the possibility of a second referendum on Brexit and the prospects for a general election.
And I have to be honest with you, I do not like the way in which people talk about a people's vote, as if those who voted in the first referendum weren't people. What were they, animals? So this whole notion that this is a proper vote, will be a proper vote is ridiculous. We will see. There is no guarantee that a second referendum will come up with something different. The split in the country now on this is very huge. Corbyn, of course, wants a general election, and he's absolutely right, because the problems facing the country, quite honestly, have little to do with remaining or quitting. It is that it's in a mess economically and politically. All this time it's been in the EU, and the Corbyn government has got a manifesto which will reverse the processes of conservatism and reactionary Labourism that have been enforced for the last 3-4 decades.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez says he regrets the results of the Brexit vote. Sánchez says he believes May's deal is the best agreement for both the EU and the UK. He made the remarks while addressing the European Parliament.
As the head of government of a European Union member state, I can only respect this result. But I do also regret the rejection of the agreement on the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the European Union, an agreement that underwent negotiation over 18 months, an agreement that was negotiated by Mr. Barnier, whom I thank for his amazing work to maintain unity among the 27 member states.
Now it's time to bring you more stories from around the world.
A suicide attack was carried out in northern Syria targeting US-led coalition forces. At least 14 people were killed. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes a day after Turkey announced it will create a safe zone in the same region. Last month, US President Donald Trump announced he would withdraw forces from northern Syria. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras is to face a no-confidence vote on Wednesday. Tsipras himself called for the motion following the resignation of a coalition partner over an agreement to end a long dispute between Greece and Macedonia by changing Macedonia's name. Last week, Macedonian lawmakers approved a constitutional revision to rename their country to the Republic of North Macedonia, but the agreement will only come into effect with the backing of the Greek parliament.
We have a series of crucial open issues in front of us. In order to move forward with directness and clarity before the national representation, I ask for the renewal, the reaffirmation of trust in Parliament. Towards this government that took the country out of the bailout program, took the country out of the crisis and opened roads of prosperity for the Greek people.
International Criminal Court prosecutors have appealed against the acquittal of former Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo, urging judges to bar him from returning to Ivory Coast. Gbagbo and his right-hand man Charles Blé Goude were acquitted on Tuesday of charges of crimes against humanity in 2010-11, in which around 3,000 people died.
And with that roundup, we come to the end of this news brief. But you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, we are on StarSat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria, and we're on social media as well. I'm Carla Gonzalez for Telesur English. Thank you for watching.